Welcome everyone. So in this video, we are going to talk about how to install Node.js and Visual Studio Code. And at the end, we will also talk about how we can set up our JavaScript programming project in the Visual Studio Code. So first, you will need to navigate to your LMS. Under your JavaScript course, you should have a module called Useful Links. And under this module, Useful Links, if you expand this module, you should be able to see Node.js installer download link as well as Visual Studio Code installer download link. So first thing that we're going to do is we are going to download the installer of Node.js from this URL. So once you click it, it is going to navigate you to this URL. Okay. And it navigates to this URL, and also it will be able to detect which operating system you are using, and it will also by default select the long-term support version of the Node.js. Okay. So this is the long-term support version of the Node.js. Make sure that whatever the version is selected here, it is the long-term support. It doesn't necessarily has to be the newest, but also it shouldn't be the oldest. For example, if you are going to use this Node.js for Playwright, Playwright is only supported with the Node.js that are 18 or higher. So therefore, I would recommend you to install this long-term support version, which is version 20. Okay. Later on, if you see some other new versions that are long-term support, yes, you can also install them. And my operating system is Mac, and I'm running it on ARM64. Of course, later on, if this ARM64 does not work for you on your Mac operating system, then you can select x64. And if you are Windows user, here by default, it will select Windows. And for the Windows, you also have x64. This is the version that you will have to select for the Windows user. And since I'm using Mac, I will select this Mac. Okay. So when you navigate to this URL, by default, it should select your operating system as well as which version you are running on, etc. Or another thing that you can do is once you click this Node.js website, the landing page will also be able to detect the version of your operating system. So by default, it is also selecting version 2017 long-term support. So when you click this Node.js link, this logo, it will take you to the landing page where you can also download the version that is detected that is suitable for your operating system. So here I can click this button to download it. Doesn't matter if you are Windows user or Mac user, as long as you are on the landing page of the Node.js, and once you click this download button, it's going to download it. Now it downloaded the installer. So next step, what I'm going to do is I am going to open my downloads folder. So here's my downloads folder. Here is the installer. This installer is downloaded under to the downloads folder. So for both Mac and Windows users, you need to double click this installer. Okay. And then you will continue to install. So you simply need to click the continue the button multiple times. Whenever it asks you to agree for the terms and conditions, you will click the agree button. And installation type, yes, you will click install. Even on the Windows, it's also going to be the same. You just continue, click next, etc. and you will install it. And of course, for the Mac users, it may ask you for your computer's password. So please enter your computer's password in order to install this third-party app. Okay, now it's installing the Node.js. And after you see this message, the installation was completed successfully, then you can close this window. Okay, on the Windows, after the installation, you should also see the message installation was completed successfully. Afterwards, we will close this window, installation window. And as for the installer, you can either keep it or remove it, doesn't matter. But for now, I'm just gonna keep it. Okay. All right. So just now we finished installing the Node.js. Next step, we need to install the Visual Studio Code. This Visual Studio Code is the code editor, and we will be adding some extensions to use it just like the IDE. Okay. And this Visual Studio Code, it supports many programming languages such as Java, Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, etc. Okay. So once you click this link, so under this useful links module, once you click this VS Code installer download link, it is going to take you to this site. And depending on your operating system, you are going to download the Visual Studio Code. Okay. So if you are a Windows user, you see, you have the user installer, system installer, as well as zip folder installer, etc. So depending on your Windows operating system, you will install one of them. So x64 is the one that usually should work for most of the Windows users. So you can also download the zip folder itself as well. And you can also install the user installer, system installer. One of those will definitely work out for you. Or if you're a Windows user, just click this one, whichever the default one that it's selecting. Try that one out. And if it does not help, if you are not able to open the Visual Studio Code, then you can try to install the others to see. Okay. And if you are a Mac user, you will click this button to install the Visual Studio Code for Mac. And of course, you can also install the zip folder itself for Intel chip, Apple Silicon, or the universal version, okay, for the Mac. If you are using M1, M2, M3, etc., those chips, then you will select Apple Silicon. If it's not M1, M2, M3, etc., then it is Intel chip. Or you can also try out this universal version, okay? There are many different versions of Visual Studio Code, but usually when you click the default download button of your operating system, then it is going to download the right one. If it's not the right one, then you will have to download the other versions, okay? So right now, since I'm using Mac operating system, I will click this button. Okay, so now it's downloading. All right, so it downloaded this zip folder. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unzip this folder. After unzipping folder, this is what it looks like, Visual Studio Code. Okay, and I will open it to make sure that it can be opened. Double click it and it should open. So as long as it's opening this Visual Studio Code, first time when you open it, of course, your window will look like this. If you are first time opening, your Visual Studio Code window should look like this. Okay. For both Windows and Mac users, your Visual Studio Code UI should look like this. And of course, if the version that you downloaded here by clicking this button or this button is not working out, try to install the other versions of the Visual Studio Code. Intel chip or Apple Silicon or Universal if you are Mac user. And if you are Windows user, try out those system installer, zip folder, x64 zip folder, user installer, those, etc. And somehow, if none of those are working out, then that means you probably will need the insider edition of the Visual Studio Code. Usually this case is very rare, okay? But somehow if your Visual Studio Code is not downloaded, not installed, etc., maybe you will need to try the insider edition of the Visual Studio Code. Once you click this link, it will take you to the site where you can install the insider version of the Visual Studio Code, and it will definitely work for your operating system. And for our course, we are going to use this regular version of the Visual Studio Code, and we will be using this Visual Studio Code a lot. So therefore, what I would recommend you to do is, I want you to pin this Visual Studio Code in the taskbar here. Okay. So next time, if you want to open Visual Studio Code, let me remove one of them. So next time, if you want to open Visual Studio Code, all you have to do is to click this button and click this app icon, and then it's going to open. If you are a Windows user, you also have this option. Once you search for the Visual Studio Code in the search bar, you can right click that app, and then pin it to the taskbar area. Or you can also create a desktop shortcut. Either way, just make sure that you are able to access to the Visual Studio Code within one click or double click, etc. Make it easier for you to access to the Visual Studio Code. Okay. And now, next step. I would recommend you to install some of the extensions to make it more flexible for you to write the program. Okay. If you don't install extension, then that means you will end up using command lines to run your JavaScript or TypeScript commands. Okay. So therefore, there are some extensions that you will be required to install. So right now, I did not open any folder in Visual Studio Code. And when you click this button, it will take you to the installer windows where you can find extensions. It will take you to the extensions window where you can find extensions and install. So there are popular installers, extensions, as well as recommended extensions, etc. And to show you the benefit of extensions, now I would like to open a folder and to show you. Okay. So now, if you would like to create any projects in your Visual Studio Code, first, it would be better if you create a default directory where you will be storing all your Visual Studio Code projects. So for that, I would recommend you to create a folder somewhere in your computer, name it Visual Studio Code Projects. That's going to be the base directory for all the projects that you will be creating in the Visual Studio Code. For example, I could create that folder on the desktop. I can create a folder, name it VS Code Projects. Okay. Let me rename this project. Name this project VS Code Projects. Okay. So I created this folder on my desktop. So that way, next time it is going to be easier for me to find the projects that I have created in Visual Studio Code. If you want any projects to be created inside Visual Studio Code, what you can do is first you can double click to open this Visual Studio Code folder that you created on your desktop, and then create the project directories first. For example, if I need to create a project for my JavaScript programming for learning purpose, I could create a subfolder first here, new folder, and name this subfolder Java JS, all lowercase, dash programming. Okay, and then press the enter key. So now JavaScript programming, this folder is created. And I am going to use this folder as a JavaScript programming project while I'm learning JavaScript programming. So next step for me is I need to open this folder, JavaScript programming, in the Visual Studio Code. So to open it in the Visual Studio Code, the easiest way would be drag and drop. So you could drag this folder and drop it to Visual Studio Code. And another way is when you go to this file explorer in the Visual Studio Code, or when you go to this file section of the Visual Studio Code, you will see this open folder option. When you click open folder option and navigate to the desktop, on the desktop you have this Visual Studio Code projects. Navigate inside the Visual Studio Code projects and make sure you select JavaScript programming. JavaScript programming needs to be selected as the root directory of the project. And then you can click this open button. As long as you see this JavaScript programming as the root directory of project, then it's good to go. If it's not the root directory, then that means you opened it incorrectly. Okay. So in order to make it easier, next time, for now, let me close this folder that I opened. Okay. In order to make it easier, next time, every time I create a folder projects under this Visual Studio Code projects folder, I will just drag that folder into Visual Studio Code and it is going to open it for me automatically. Okay. And there are also some couple settings that I want you to do, a couple extensions that I want you to install to make it more readable and understand, to make your codes to be more readable and understandable and easier to write the codes. Okay. So when you go to this extension section, you should be able to search for the extensions such as Code Runner. That's the first extension that you need to install. This extension, it makes it easier for you to run the code with one click. When you are writing JavaScript or TypeScript codes, if you don't have this extension, you would have to give the node command to run them. But with the help of this command, there's a run button that you will see. It will be added to somewhere here once you install this extension. Then whenever you write any JavaScript codes or TypeScript codes, you will be able to just click that run button to run it. So this is the first extension that I recommend you to install. And then afterwards, the next extension that you need to install is material icon. So this extension, to make it more easier for you to see the folder and file and their structures, what type of folders or files they are, etc., it makes it much more readable and understandable, the folder and file types. It's going to make it easier for you to create the files, create the folders. So therefore, I also recommend you to install this extension. Okay. And yes, we can set it as the default icon. When you install it, it will ask you, select the icon theme. We can select this material icon theme. Okay. All right. Now, so far we installed 2 extensions. And for JavaScript programming, I want you to install this extension as well, which is JavaScript code snippet. This is the extension, JavaScript code snippet. Please click this install button to install it. Okay. And now you have 3 extensions. And another extension that I would recommend you to install is the prettier format. Prettier code formatter. So as soon as you start to type prettier code formatter, this is by default, this is the one that pops up. So it is going to make it easier for you to format the code and make them look good. So I need you to install this extension as well. Okay. The extension is installed. After you install this extension, if it asks for, would you like to set it as a default formatter, then just make sure you select yes for that option. Okay. All right. So the extensions that we installed so far, they are good enough for us to start the JavaScript. And also, whenever you are programming JavaScript or TypeScript, you will be leaving some comments and for better understanding. So therefore, there is one more extension called better comments that I want you to install. So click this install button to install. Okay. Now, these extensions has been installed now already. Okay. When you go to the extensions tab, let's reload these extensions. Under the installed extensions, you should have those 5 extensions. With the help of those 5 extensions, now you will be able to write your JavaScript and TypeScript codes much more easier and be able to run them and execute them. In our next session, we will talk about some of the other settings of the Visual Studio Code to enable autosave, autocomplete, as well as font size, etc. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. See you all in the next video.